Welcome to session 2 of the 7x7 video series for understanding and applying the SFS. In this session, we'll discuss what specifically were the underlying factors that emerged in factor analysis. This is important, as we said last time, because these underlying factors can essentially be seen as 3 core attributes of spiritual fitness in the military domain. As a reminder, each of these factors emerged through a complex statistical process known as factor analysis. We were checking to see whether the questions that we were asking our many thousands of participants were sufficiently related to each other to belong to one or more coherent categories of questions about spiritual fitness. The individual questions that didn't seem to relate well to many of the others were discarded. So as we went, the questions that remained related more and more to many of the other questions that remained. In fact, the remaining questions were coalescing together in what we call item pools around 3 main themes. The first, personal relationship with God or a higher power. The second, commitment to a set of self-transcendent values, beliefs, and pursuing ultimate meaning and purpose. And the third, a self-donating commitment to people in the sense of sacrificing one's own comforts and desires to serve others. So by the time we published the final version of the SFS, these 3 items had hardened into clear spiritual traits, which we call PCHP, or personal connection with a higher power, PMPV, or the pursuit of meaning, purpose, and values, and SSGG, service and sacrifice for the greater good. Actually, these are the 3 spiritual traits that the SFS measures quantitatively. Our scale allows us to track people's growth and commitment to these 3 traits, these 3 core attributes of spiritual fitness over time, and to determine whether and how much local chaplain programming can help to affect positive change in these 3 areas of spirituality. We can do this by asking 17 straightforward questions recorded on a Likert-type 5-point ascending scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. You can see the actual questions which emerged from the development project in section 2 of your resource book. Okay, but looking at these questions in the resource book might lead you to wonder a few things. Why are the questions that contain specific language about God listed separately and with qualifying instructions, while the questions about meaning, purpose, values, and service are all mixed together? And don't you see 18 items listed in the resource book instead of 17? This brings us to a point that we should all consider carefully. As I mentioned in the first video, we knew from the total force fitness and preservation of the force frameworks that we would need to be able to measure spirituality among both theists and non-theists and everyone in between. However, we were also receiving steady and reliable input, even from our qualitative baselining work, that people who believe in God do not really like answering spiritual questions that contain no reference to God. While on the other hand, people who do not believe in God may be open to answering spiritual questions, but they don't really like answering questions that include a lot of language about God. This kind of feedback is important for researchers and has to be taken seriously because it's not just simply a question of preference, it can undermine validity. In other words, if you give people a lot of questions they don't like, they may tend to quit before finishing the scale, or they may answer haphazardly in frustration. Our response was to keep the questions about God separate from the others and to add a screener question about belief in God as item 11, bringing the total number of questions on the SFS to 18. Also, to allow respondents to take the God questions last or even to opt out. This way, non-theists will still be able to relate to the scale and will be free to avoid direct questions about God and can still be profiled along 2 of the 3 core attributes of spiritual fitness. SFS profiles, then, for non-theists, will not include scores for the attribute of personal connection with God or a higher power. That attribute will simply be missing in their scores. We'll talk about that in a later session. Let's shift gears now and close this session by mentioning how the 3 core attributes actually line up with concerns related to traditional chaplain roles. After all, if chaplains are going to use the SFS to measure growth related to their programs and services, they will need to align those programs and services to some extent with the 3 core attributes. First, let's consider PCHP, or personal connection with God or a higher power. This core attribute lines up well with the traditional chaplain roles of providing and facilitating religious ministry. There's a table, by the way, in section 2 of your resource book, which can help support this part of our discussion. PMPV, or the pursuit of meaning, purpose, and values, lines up well with traditional chaplain roles related to character development, moral leadership, ethical advisement, especially as they relate to staying optimally aligned with our beliefs and highest values and ultimate understandings of purpose in life. Lastly, SSGG, or service and sacrifice for the greater good, lines up well with traditional chaplain roles related to relationship development at all levels, including family and marriage coaching, supporting team building and unit cohesion, and supporting cultural awareness in domestic and global operations. The primary focus of SSGG, we should say, in contrast with other social sciences scales measuring aspects of relationship that are not primarily spiritual in nature, is that SSGG is focused specifically on self-donation and the motivation and commitment of human beings for altruism and self-sacrifice. This self-transcendent pursuit is a spiritual pursuit for just this reason. It's self-transcendent. Next time, we'll talk a little more about these 3 core attributes and the traditional chaplain roles associated with them. We'll also discuss our findings from the last stage of the development project, in which we ran a different kind of correlative analysis to find relationships between our 3 core attributes and traits related to various wellness categories, such as quality of life, resilience, coping, social support, and more. If we have time, we'll begin to discuss the process of scoring the metric. See you then.